Today, we are going to go a little bit more in depth into the subject-verb agreement rule. Now, remember, the subject-verb agreement rule is something you always need to be aware of, especially in terms of the simple present tense. Okay? It's really not that complicated. A lot of students get really confused and they find it really difficult to remember this rule, but it shouldn't be as hard as most students think it is, and it really shouldn't be that hard to remember. What the subject and verb need to agree on is just number. And that number is usually determined by one letter, the letter S. One way to think about the subject-verb agreement rule is that there will always be an S. A singular subject has no S. There's only one. S usually denotes more than one. It shows plural. A singular verb will then have an S. So singular subject, no S, singular verb, add an S. Similarly, if there's more than one in your subject, so if there's two or more, and sometimes it might be tricky because there are some irregular nouns, when they're plural, they don't use the letter S to show more than one. Words like people, words like children, okay? Men, women. These words don't use the letter S to show plural, but you have to be able to imagine it's there whenever there's more than one. That is actually the rule for irregular nouns. Irregular nouns are words, nouns, that do not have the letter S in their plural form. So they can be tricky. But the rule doesn't change. If the noun is plural, if the subject is plural, if there's more than one and there is or should be an S, then the verb has no S. It is simply the bare infinitive. I probably just lost you with those last two words, so let's talk about that first, okay? The bare infinitive is really easy. It's just the word, the verb, as you would find it in the dictionary. It's the word by itself. That is what we call the bare infinitive. It's the bare infinitive because the infinitive form of a verb is simply to plus the verb. And we use this when we define verbs, right? When we tell what verbs mean, we use the infinitive form. And the infinitive form can also be used in other ways. I don't want to get too complicated. You'll learn about it later. But just know, the bare infinitive, when I say that, it's nothing scary or complicated. Okay? Don't be scared. It's just the word that you would look up in the dictionary to find it. So, this is it. One subject, bare infinitive plus S. Two subjects, bare infinitive. In the simple present tense, that is the entirety of the subject-verb agreement rule. How easy is that? So easy. Let's look at some examples. A child screams. One child, this is the verb to scream. If we looked it up in the dictionary, it would just be scream, and all we did was add the S. A child screams. If I want to use the plural, if I want to show you with an irregular verb, the same sentence. The children scream. Children is the irregular plural of child. One child, many children. Scream is just the word that you would look up in the dictionary. This is all the subject-verb agreement rule is in the simple present tense. One, verb plus S. More than one, verb no S. How hard is that? Now, it gets a little more complicated when we use the be verb. The be verb is probably the most irregular verb in the English language. And the be verb, you have to worry about the subject-verb agreement rule in every tense. Because the be verb rarely is used in the infinitive form. If you look up the word be in the dictionary, you're almost never going to use that as a verb in your writing or in your speaking. It's very rarely used like this. Instead, in the simple present tense, it has three forms, and it's one of, if not the only verb in English that has three forms in the simple present tense. If I'm talking about myself, I might say, well, I am scared. I don't know why I'm scared, but I'm starting to feel a little scared. And if I'm talking about someone else, I can say, well, Andrew is scared too. I don't know if that makes me feel any better. I don't know if I would rather be scared alone or scared with a friend. I mean, the others are not scared. So here, all of these are simple present tense constructions. I am, Andrew is, the others are. That's the be verb in the simple present tense. Now, again, you're never going to find it like this. Only pirates speak like this. Arr, I be a pirate. Arr. You don't want to talk like pirates. Pirates are... Oh my goodness. Pirates have invaded like you. That's why I'm so scared. Do you notice? This is not the simple present tense. This is a tense you will learn about much later, but you still need to be able to recognize subject-verb agreement, because it's not just the simple present tense that uses subject-verb agreement. In fact, other tenses use subject-verb agreement, especially when they use the be verb or the verb to have, and that is pretty much every other tense. So you do need to be aware of subject-verb agreement in other tenses, but only with these two kinds of verbs, okay? Once we start making other tenses using these words, these verbs will be the first word in that construction, and then that's the only one that's going to change in terms of subject-verb agreement, or like past, present, future. And then the tense constructions themselves, they are repeated patterns over and over again that you just have to learn. We're not going to get into that, but you have to know subject-verb agreement. Pirates have invaded. This is my verb. This is part of the verb construction that always uses a past form, and then this is my first word that has to have subject-verb agreement. Now, pirates have invaded IQ, and one has a sword. Here we are back to the simple present, because you can use verbs in pretty much all tenses most of the time, and one pirate has or owns a sword. But here we have the two present tense forms of the verb have. Have and has. Now, we are all going to be fighting for our lives. You know, against the pirates. That's what we are going to be doing. We're all going to be fighting. Now, this is a very complicated verb structure. All of these words from are, not all, but are going to be fighting, this is all one verb tense. It starts with the be verb. And the be verb always has to follow the subject-verb agreement rule. Now, the exception here, you actually see that word be. But this isn't the main part of the verb. It's part of those patterns within the verb structure that you'll be learning about later. Now, unless you do well on your quiz, we walk the plank I know this stuff is hard, but you need to do well on your quiz, otherwise we walk the plank. Here, the subject-verb agreement is in this area, we walk. This is what we do if you do poorly or if you do not do well on your quiz. So it's up to you to save us. Save us. Now, in the imperative, when you give commands, remember this is a type of sentence structure, it's always going to be the infinitive form of the verb, and you'll never have to worry about subject-verb agreement rule. Why? Because the subject of imperatives is always the same. It's always the person being spoken to. It's always you, and it's always now. You need to save us by watching this video again, doing really well on your next quiz, and to help you, let's review.
Subject-verb agreement rule. What is true about the subject-verb agreement rule? There is always an S or ES somewhere in the subject-verb agreement rule. What does singular mean? Singular means there is only one. How do we know if a proper noun is singular? A singular proper noun doesn't have an S at the end. Example, John. How do we know if a verb is singular? A singular verb has an S at the end. Example, plays. What does plural mean? Plural means there is more than one. How do we know if a proper noun is plural? A plural proper noun usually has an S at the end. Example, dogs. What is tricky about irregular nouns? Irregular nouns do not have an S in plural form. Example, men, people, mice, feet. How do we know if a verb is plural? A plural verb does not have an S at the end. Example, play. What is the bare infinitive? The bare infinitive is just the word as you would find it in the dictionary. What is the subject-verb agreement rule? Singular noun equals singular verb plus S. Plural nouns equal plural verb, no S.